The Hurricanes had a pretty successful February, had a little bit of a difficult start to March, and now the trade deadline is right around the corner. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, so for starters, we're going to do a quick recap of February. We'll talk a little bit about the schedule ahead in March, and then we're going to discuss the big elephant in the room right now, the trade deadline, which is coming up on March 8th, and that's only a few days away. The Canes have been linked to a lot of different names. Some of them are very big names, but as of the recording of this video, there's no traction yet. Something might happen during this video, so we'll see. So first, we're going to talk about February. The Hurricanes had a pretty successful February. I predicted they would get 18 points. They fell just short of that with 17 points. But what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the month as a whole, see where the Hurricanes improved, where they had a few deficiencies, and how well they held up through February, because March is going to be much more difficult. There's a lot of pivotal games, particularly one against the Rangers on the 12th. The Hurricanes didn't have a whole lot of power plays this month, but the power play did take a step back. I think it got a little rusty because, let's just face it, the Hurricanes were not getting the calls this month. But 17 out of a possible 24 points, that's an excellent February, and the team definitely built some momentum going into March. And I feel really good about this regular roster as far as being competitive in the playoffs. I still think they need to add something, so after the February recap, we'll talk more about potential suitors and potential players that may be going back the other way on or prior to the deadline on March 8th. So I'm showing the basic statistics for January because I want to show that this team has found a lot of consistency, particularly since the players-only meeting back in December. But for sake of comparison here, I want to see really how they've done over the last 60 days or so. So in January, the Hurricanes had 11 games played. They won 8 of them, lost 2, had 1 overtime loss for a total of 17 points out of a possible 22, a win percentage of .773, a goal differential of 13, an outstanding power play percentage of 33.3, a penalty killing percentage of 90.3, 32.64 shots per game, a shot percentage of 10.9, shots against per game of 22.27. The save percentage in December was .897. It dipped a little bit to .894, but then as you go into February, the team maintained the consistency, getting 17 out of a possible 24 points with 8 wins, 3 losses, 1 overtime loss, a win percentage of .708. Any win percentage above .700 is really good. Again, a goal differential of 13 on 35-4 and 22 against. The power play percentage took a little bit of a dip, but the Hurricanes made up enough for it 5-on-5 to maintain the same goal differential and a similar win percentage. The penalty kill still held up strong and only dipped a little bit from 90.3 to 84.2. Shots per game held steady around 30. Shot percentage held steady at 9.7. Shots against per game went up a little bit for 27.17, but the goaltending has been coming up really big lately. Pyotr Kochekov and Spencer Martin have done an excellent job holding down the fort in the crease, and the team save percentage as a result is now up to .933, and that's the type of result you need if a team is going to win a Stanley Cup. So now the Hurricanes sit 4th in the Eastern Conference, 2nd in the Metropolitan Division, with 3.28 goals per game sitting in 12th. Goals against per game, they have 2.75, putting them in 6th. The power play percentage is in 3rd, which is great at 27.0. I would like to see that get closer to 30 and stay there. And the penalty killing percentage has climbed all the way to 3rd in the league, 84.1. As we go through all the games here from February, one thing that you'll notice is that the Hurricanes did not get blown out at all this month. So the first game back, my buddy Griff over at Caniac Sessions made a really good point about this. That was the first game after the All-Star break. And he basically said, first game after the All-Star break, he feels like the road team has an advantage because they're kind of in a routine. They had to practice, get on the plane, get to the hotel, get checked in, have their team meeting, and go straight to the rink. It's kind of like they have to be all business before the home team does, and I absolutely agree with his assessment of that. And not to mention, it's very possible, without the gaffe by Kochekov that ultimately led to what became the game-winning goal for Vancouver, Carolina probably walks out of that game with at least 1 point. Despite Kochekov making another mistake in the next game, the Hurricanes did beat Colorado 5-2 after that one really weird goal from center ice. One of the most exciting games that I've seen all season, probably actually one of the most exciting regular season games I've seen in a long time that wasn't played in a football stadium, was Whalers night against the New Jersey Devils, where the Hurricanes grinded out a 1-0 win. Fyodor Kochetkov was excellent that night. It was definitely a goaltender's duel, and he came out on top. The Hurricanes started their first road trip of the month against the Dallas Stars, losing 4-2. One of those was an empty netter, so essentially you did lose that game by only 1 goal. They bounced back really quick, had a good decisive 5-1 victory over Arizona. They then went on to play Vegas the very next day and had a 3-1 win against the defending Stanley Cup champions, beating them for the second time this season. They come back home, Chicago's only road game of the month. They managed to win 6-3. And then a game that I was able to attend was where they played against Florida and managed to win 1-0. The Hurricanes then played Dallas. I didn't particularly like how that game was officiated, but the Hurricanes couldn't generate enough offense. They didn't generate a ton of high danger chances, and when they did, they didn't convert on them. So typically when the Hurricanes lose games, that tends to be the story, but it does appear to be happening less. The Dallas game was at 8 p.m. the previous night, and they played Buffalo at 6:30. And I felt like they actually played pretty well that game. The hand pass that was called on Kotkaniemi that ultimately was not reviewable, that in what would have been the game-winning goal for the Hurricanes, that was an egregiously bad call. But the Hurricanes bounced back and won 3-2 in Minnesota, then wrapped up the month with a game against Columbus that was incredibly stressful, but managed to win 4-2. Another thing this month, a lot of players played very characteristic games. Martin Necas was the leading scorer with a total of 11 points, 5 goals, 6 assists, a +4 rating, took 4 penalty minutes, had 1 power play goal, 1 game-winning goal, clocked about 17 minutes of ice time per game. Seth Jarvis is proving that the Hurricanes really need to keep him long-term. His development has come a long way. His defensive abilities have evolved greatly just this season alone. Teuvo Teravainen had a very excellent month himself, managed to clock in 2 goals, but more than anything, we saw the playmaking come out with Teuvo Teravainen as he had a total of 8 assists, leading the team through the month of February in that category. Sebastian Aho led in the goal-scoring department, 6 goals, 2 assists for a total of 8 points, +5, did really well defensively, did all the stuff he needed to do on the penalty kill and then some. And 3 of his 6 goals, half of the goals he had this month, were game winners, and that's what you need out of someone like Aho. You need him to be that clutch guy, that difference maker, and that's what he did a lot of this month. And one of those was an overtime goal, as aforementioned, with the Dallas, as aforementioned with the one that he scored on Whalers night. And another thing that he's doing, he's taking on heavy minutes, especially for a forward, because you use him in every single situation. So seeing him clock 19 minutes a night, he's going to be doing that for a very long time to come in this league. Jordan Staal actually had a solid month in terms of production as well. 2 goals, 6 assists for a total of 8 points, had a +4 rating, did everything that he does defensively and everything like that, had an assist shorthanded. Jordan Martinook, we saw a little bit of playoff Martinook, especially during about the second week of the season, where he also had 7 points on 3 goals and 4 assists. Brady Shea was the ultimate Brady Shea this month. Great two-way play. Goal and 5 assists for 6 points, +6 rating. Svechnikov was a little slow this month, only having 5 points in 10 games. He'll bounce back. Brent Burns had 5 points in 12 games as well. Michael Bunting had 3 goals, 1 assist for a total of 4 points. One of those goals coming on the power play. Steph Nason continues to be that role-playing depth forward that the Hurricanes have really leaned on 5-on-5 and on the power play. He also had 3 points this month and a +3 rating, with one of them being a power play assist and one of them being a game-winning goal. Jesperi Kotkaniemi, his struggles are continuing. Hopefully he can bounce back soon, because this can't keep happening with him if he's going to fill the second-line center role. I always saw KK as a middle 6 center, and I think that's ultimately the role he's going to settle into with the Hurricanes long-term. Tony DeAngelo was called on a few times this month with an injury to Jalen Chatfield after taking a rough ride. Clean hit, hard play by Ivan Barbashev when they played against the Vegas Golden Knights earlier in the month, and he was serviceable while there. 6 games played, 1 goal, which was in the game against Buffalo, ± a 4, and I'm not the biggest believer in plus-minus being a directly attributable stat. I see it as a starting point, but I watched every game this month except the Buffalo one. 2 of them I saw in person when they played against the Sabres and when they played against the Stars. Tony and Shea worked pretty well as a pair. Keep that in mind. It'll be relevant for some of the stuff I'm going to discuss here in a little bit. Jalen Chatfield continues to prove that he is a monster of a right-handed shutdown defenseman. He did have a goal this month, but the one thing I noticed about Chatfield, As confident of a player as he is, it seems like he's growing even more confident in that aggressive gap control. I didn't think he'd get any more decisive, but right now, Jalen Chatfield is second only to Jacob Slavin on this team in terms of his ability to force turnovers and to play really solid defense in his own zone and to shut down transition. The Hurricanes absolutely have to sign Jalen Chatfield. So to summarize how well this month actually went, the Hurricanes were a couple of goaltending mistakes, a couple of missed calls, and a few inconsistent minutes of play away from potentially sweeping the entire month of February. The games that they did lose, minus the one to Buffalo, were against cup contenders. The Vancouver Canucks were first place in the league when they came to Raleigh, and they're still one of the best teams in the league right now. Dallas, also a legitimate cup contender, and I think that they have a similar structure to the Hurricanes, except leaning a little bit more towards the offensive side of the game as opposed to the defensive side. They do rely a lot on their defense to generate a lot of their scoring chances for them, and they rely on a great net front presence to finish on them. See Joe Pavelski, maybe the greatest guy in the history of the game at tipping pucks in. And I know it's kind of an unpopular thing when Brendan Moore says it, but it is true. The shootout is a skills competition. It means absolutely nothing once you get to the playoffs. In a way, 3-on-3 is. You might be playing 3-on-3 overtime in the playoffs, but if that happened, there's been a lot of penalties handed out, and we see that the NHL, traditionally, it seems like they let a lot more stuff go in the playoffs than what they do in the regular season. So suffice to say, the Hurricanes are on the right track. Now, a lot of people will point out the third period collapse against Winnipeg. One thing that I have to point out that my buddy Sam Wallace said over on his show, the Caniac Report, it's an 82-game season. They blew a 3-goal lead in one period. They absolutely collapsed. They took their foot off the gas, and the Hurricanes only had themselves to blame for losing that game. Yes, you can talk about Kochetkov pulling the Ed Belfour and coming out to another zip code to try and make that poke check that ultimately resulted in Winnipeg going ahead in the game. But a team as good as Carolina, or a team as good as any other team in the league, will not go through an 82-game season and not have a 3-goal lead evaporate in the third period in a game that they should have won. They're the best hockey players in the world playing against the other best hockey players in the world. Over the course of an 82-game season, eventually that is going to happen. So that brings me to my next point. There have been a lot of names around the rumor mill in regards to who the Hurricanes could be moving out and who they could be trying to bring in. They apparently made a very substantial offer in an attempt to get Elias Pettersson from the Vancouver Canucks, to the point where it resulted in the Canucks front office apparently having the leverage to get him to sign an 8-year deal with an $11.6 million average annual value. Now, I have no idea what was actually included in that trade package, but some of the insiders did say some names, and they actually make sense. Kotkaniemi and Natchez were in there, and I can only imagine what else was potentially in it. It did not happen. It does make me optimistic that the front office is making a really, really hard push to try and make a substantial move at the deadline. The primary names that have been linked to the Hurricanes have been Jake Guentzel from the Pittsburgh Penguins, Frank Vatrano and Adam Henrique from the Anaheim Ducks, Anthony Duclair from the San Jose Sharks, and Pavel Buchnevich from the St. Louis Blues. Out of all those names, I think that Guentzel would be the most beneficial to the Hurricanes, but I do not think that they will trade for him without an extension in place. I think Frank Vatrano would be the biggest return on investment, even if you did get him strictly as a rental with no intention to extend him. Adam Henrique and Anthony Duclair would both be good depth pieces. Henrique from the standpoint of experience and adding to the center depth. Anthony Duclair should not be plan A, but he would make a hell of a plan B, and he would slot in perfectly with this team style of play. Pavel Buchnevich would also be an excellent option, and I think that he would be what the Hurricanes would really look for, considering they could give up a few assets to get him, but they would still have a year of him after the fact. Now, here's what you have to consider. What do the Hurricanes give up to get any of these players? One, if they try to get Jake Guentzel, an extension would have to be in place, like I said, but that's also a trade within the division, and I think Kyle Dubas would ask for more than what he would from someone in the Atlantic Division or in the Western Conference. It's always better to do business outside of the division, and if you can do business in the other conference, even better for everybody involved, especially if it's a team that you think there is zero chance of you seeing in the finals. When it comes to the St. Louis Blues and the Anaheim Ducks, that's pretty much the case. Now, If it were up to me, and I have nothing to back this up, but I think that this is kind of the front office's mindset. You're at a fork in a road where you can only pick one or the other, are looking to build a long-term roster with sustainable success. In order for them to do that, it is my personal opinion that whatever they decide to move out needs to consist strictly of prospects or strictly of draft picks, not a mix of the two, unless it is a huge return, such as Jake Gensel, with a reasonable contract and term. As far as roster players, I don't think that they're looking to move any of them. The only ones I could see them moving are Tony DeAngelo and Jesperi Kotkaniemi, maybe Brett Pesce. Brett Pesce would fetch you a bigger return, and I highly doubt that he's re-signing. If you did get an overwhelming offer for Pesce, I would say move him. He's not been the same, and Tony looked like he fit in just fine with Brady Shea. And the Hurricanes are not a team that's built on a first, second, and third pair. The defensive pairs are built by committee. They have a distribution between offensive defensemen and shutdown defenseman that's really well balanced, and Tony will fit in just fine so long as he's paired with Brady Shea. I am very much against trading Martin Necas from the standpoint of this team needs offense. I don't see any point in having less of a net positive in the production department if you move Necas out for the sake of bringing offense in. If we needed a defenseman really bad, I could see moving a piece like Necas, but we definitely don't need a defenseman. Thanks to Spencer Martin being great when called upon, Pyotr Kochetkov has been playing excellent all month. Freddie Anderson is close to returning. There's no longer a need for the Hurricanes to attempt to acquire a goaltender. The reason I say that the Hurricanes need to pick either going with just trading picks or just trading prospects, if the Hurricanes decide to just trade a prospect or a series of prospects, they can hold on to their draft picks to reload the prospect pool and develop new players before the current core ages. Now, if you trade draft picks and just strictly draft picks and hold on to your prospects, you already have a pretty good idea of what roles your current prospects, at least your high-end prospects, are going to fulfill. So in terms of long-term success, but still giving the team a better chance to win the cup now, I think the safer route would be to go with strictly picks and maybe some B prospects. Now, which prospects should be off the table? In my opinion, you already know the first one I'm going to say, Alexander Nikishin. There is literally nobody in this league that would be available, even someone whose name has not been thrown around yet, even if there's an unexpected player become available, which I think the Hurricanes are going to make an unexpected trade. Either way, they should not, and I do not think they will, but they should not include the rights to Alexander Nikishin. The biggest reason being Alexander Nikishin is the key to the Hurricanes' defense staying elite as Jacob Slavin starts to age. The league is in a confusing time right now. One second it seems like it wants to go the direction of Connor Bedard, and the next second it seems like it wants to go the direction of Matt Rimfe. Alexander Nikishin falls very much in the middle of those two types of players. He provides a ton of scoring. You can use him in all situations. He's very physical. He's got a booming shot. He's fast, great skater, uses his frame well. Do not trade him. Additionally, Scott Morrow seems to be one of those quick puck-moving defensemen that has cerebral playmaking ability. And this is hard to conceive, but Brent Burns is not going to play hockey forever. You will need Scott Morrow to fill that void of having offense from the blue line that still provides you competent defense. Morrow still has a few steps to take there, but from what I've seen from his previous UMass season to now, he has taken huge steps in the defensive side of the game, and I think he's someone who potentially will be the guy on the right of Jacob Slavin in the future. I think he would be a more reasonable trade piece than Nikishin, but still should be heavily considered to be off the table. Felix Unger-Sorum, especially after watching him play in the World Junior Hockey Championship, should most certainly be off the table. Felix Unger-Sorum is going to give you pretty much a one-for-one replication of Teuvo Teravainen with a higher ceiling, and the amount of hockey IQ that kid has is not normal. It is well above average. And if the Hurricanes are looking to add some more firepower up front, they might be the ones firing the shell, but Felix Unger-Sorum is going to be the guy that's loading them a lot. Puck distribution is a very specific skill set. In a lot of ways, I see puck distribution as a more difficult skill set than goal scoring, as you're trying to hit a moving target while you're avoiding a bunch of other moving targets. Bradley Nadeau, Jackson Blake, both look really good in the NCAA. It would be great if you could hold on to both of those guys. If you cannot, I think those are the two that you consider moving before anybody else aforementioned on the list. So in conclusion, I think the best bet for the Hurricanes, do not move any of your high-end prospects. Strictly trade draft picks if you can. The players that are expected to make the team over the coming few seasons are still very young. The core is still pretty young, and they have the ability to keep the team competitive, at least consistently making the playoffs, I would say, but more than likely competitive over the next decade or so. Now is a good time to give up some draft picks, and not to mention, as we saw after the Kokanami offer sheet, the Hurricanes will not hesitate to trade down to get more picks to reload the prospect pool. So that's all I've got for this video. I will more than likely be a guest on Caniac Sessions tomorrow night, and that episode will be released the morning after. I always have a good time with Griffin AB. You guys won't be seeing much from me here for a little bit. The girlfriend and our 2 four-legged kids, we're going to be moving into a new apartment. And then once I'm settled in there and everything, I'll be good to go. And I should be completely settled in before the playoffs. And I have some special things planned around that time too. If you like this video, please hit the like button, comment, share, and subscribe. And if you are able, please consider donating to my Buy Me a Coffee. The link will be in the description. Thank you very much. Y'all take care. I'll see you next time.